that listens to what you say. Learn more about this exciting radio broadcasting opportunity by calling WNZK Radio at 248-557-3500. This is WNZK, Dearborn Heights, Detroit, your ethnic superstation at 690 days, 680 nights.
The Hanania Show is brought to you by the U.S. Arab Radio Network and sponsored by Arab News Newspaper, the Middle East's leading English language publication, with print and online editions in Saudi Arabia, Dubai, France, Japan, Pakistan, England, and the United States. Listen to live radio every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern in Detroit, Washington, D.C., New York, and Ontario, Canada. Or watch the live broadcast on Facebook.com/Arab News. The Hanania Show is rebroadcast in Chicago at 12 noon on Thursday. For more information on the radio stations, live Facebook broadcast, and podcasts, visit ArabNews.com. And now, here's your host, columnist and U.S. Special Correspondent for Arab News, Hanania.
And welcome. It's Hanania here at the Hanania Show, Wednesday, July 27, 2022. We're broadcasting live in Detroit, Washington, D.C., and tomorrow, Thursday, we'll be rebroadcasting tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. on WNZK AM 690, and in Chicago at 12 noon on WNWI AM 1080, which is a big station that covers the northern Illinois and gets a good audience. Today, we're going to look at the politics of the Arab American community, and I have two guests that are going to join us. Paul Sophia, who is a Republican and conservative Michigan activist who has run for political office there in the past. He's an educator and he's very active in the community there in Michigan. And later at the bottom of the hour, we'll talk with Jim Zogby, a Democrat and president of the Arab American Institute based in Washington, D.C. We're going to talk about how do the two parties treat Arab Americans, Republicans and Democrats. What challenges do Arab Americans face, and how do Arab Americans win office to get a seat at the table to make the decisions that impact us, that are based on our taxes that we pay, but we don't get as much back as we should. So in segment one, I want to welcome Paul Sophia. He's a Republican and conservative Arab American political activist, teacher, a business consultant in the Dearborn area, and he served on various state boards. He was a former GOP candidate in Michigan's 15th State House District. Paul, welcome to the program today.
Thanks for having me, Ray. Appreciate it.
No, it's it. And, you know, there was a time when I know when I was growing up that all the Arabs I knew were Republican. We were a conservative community because we seem to have, you know, we embrace a lot, even today, a lot of the conservative fundamental issues, you know, being resistant to abortion or opposed to it, you know, supporting more emphasis of religion in our lives and in society, and other issues. And yet today, it seems like the Arab Americans have moved to the left. First of all, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you have gotten into politics, and then talk about the Arab community that, as you see it, who are they and what do they care about?
Okay, I'll give it a shot. Thanks. I got into politics a while back. I worked up on Capitol Hill for not quite a year as a speechwriter, and kind of saw the demographics and did a lot of people watching. And back then, it's an amalgamation of people going there. And when I came back, I got very curious into what was really going on in my neighborhood in Michigan proper. And I also wanted to better myself. I didn't want to be a victim. I didn't want to be identified as, one of the Arab Americans. Yeah, that's what I am. Yeah, that's what I'm proud of. That's where my family came from and all of that. But we're as individual as snowflakes. You know, of course, you get enough of them, there'll be people that have common interests that circle together, but that identity politics is really turned me off. And that's kind of why I came to the Republican Party. Now, you can debate in recent times that the Republicans have entered in that more and stuff like that. But I think that if you want to maintain the individuality and the specialness of the United States, you have to realize that we're individuals. And what we really need to do is live our lives with as much freedom and courtesy and being a good citizen in society without the hobnail boot of big government being on our throats. We've got a great model for a country. It's the only country in history that says the individual is sovereign and not the rulers. So, it negates rulers from snatching people up off the streets and the family never sees them again. So it's not an issue now, but way back then it was. But we still start to see more and more of the overreach and the government legislation. So that's kind of why I went there. I'm still into, I think the individuals have the right, the final say is with the individuals. The people that got elected work for individuals, work for the people. And no matter if you're far right or far left, you've got the right to hold them accountable depending on what their promises were at their time of election. So that's kind of it. And again, I'm more situated and interested in fiscal policy. I think if everybody has a job, has a proper education, they can overcome everything. My family did it. My grandparents did it, when they came over, and my parents as well. They didn't want to go back there. They wanted to stay here, and all of that, it kind of makes me who I am.
Yeah, and I know that when Arab Americans run for office, and I'm not sure if it's because we push to do this or because the media labels us and stereotypes us, we tend to lead with the Middle East. We have it on our shoulders first and foremost. So we go into local elections as the Arab candidate. And I think that gives us a disadvantage. I think if we're going to get involved in politics, shouldn't we be the American candidate who happens to be Arab? And our focus should be on the local issues. We're American, right? We pay our taxes. We abide by the law. I mean, shouldn't we do that?
Oh, absolutely. It's interesting in Dearborn, the last election, we did have a lot of Arab Americans running, and a lot of them ran and won for office. So, it's a lot of, being in the right place at the right time, having the right social network. But they're all, regardless, they're all cut from the same cloth. And I'm not sure why that is. I've been trying to figure that out. Greater thinkers than me have discussed it and wonder why. As you said before, Ray, a few decades ago, they at least leaned Republican, and now it's, first recourse is let's run to the government and ask them to help us, but it's like you have a broken leg, they chop off your leg, and as opposed to setting it, and then they give you a crutch and saying you should be thankful. Well, you still have one leg. Why am I thankful for the crutch? Should have just set the leg. So that's kind of the philosophy. And given the fact that the Arabs, the Arab Americans, the ones that have come here, are very, very ambitious, very intelligent. The city of Dearborn is hustling and bustling. These entrepreneurs are opening up restaurants. They're opening up just about everything you think of, engineering companies that contract with the big three internationally. They're opening up little mom and pop shoe stores and dry cleaners. So, they're in the fabric. And I wish there was a way to break down a mental block, if that's what it is, to let them know, there's no panacea. As a business owner, you're going to suffer the same fate as the other people who are overregulated. So that's something they've got to realize.
Is it hard to be a Republican today in the Arab American community? I mean, I'm public about what I do. I could not vote for Hillary Clinton. I had to vote for Trump. He was the alternative. I didn't see another significant alternative back then. I don't think Trump, from the standpoint of the Arab community, really did much for us. So I ended up voting for Biden. when he ran. And now I'm looking at Biden and I'm going, you know what? I don't think he's as effective as the person that I want. And I'm sure you agree that politics isn't about 100%. We try to find the better candidate. And so far, I'm still struggling. What does the Republican Party, do you think, offer the Arab Americans as voters and homeowners?
I think they offer them the American way of life more so than the Democrats. They should get back to the days of saying, what's good for one is good for all. Now, there's nuances to that. There's laws that have to be in effect to protect people's property and their life and their families, and things like that. I mean, some of the things that have gone on, all over the country, all over the world after 9/11 were just egregious. What was going on and the way they slander Middle Easterners and things like that. I've got personal stories myself of that, but that's not, there's lunatics everywhere. Let's put it like that. You can't say it's this group or it's that group. There's a huge misunderstanding. The people here generally, I would say, are good people. They're not going to do anything to harm you. I think a lot of it has to do with education. For instance, I was getting to talk to people around the state, different groups, and they were shocked to find out Iran and Turkey weren't Arab countries. They're Turks and they're Iranians or Persians, and then so you spend 10 minutes on trying to explain that, and then all of a sudden the light comes on. They get this bright idea. Oh, I didn't know that. I need to find out more. So that was it. And then, all the arguments, and I'm not, I can't keep up with them. It's, you got the Saudis that are hated by the Iranians who are hated by these people and this and this. So everybody, I think, around here who's not in touch intimately with the Middle East is a little bit confused, and they go back to their original positions.
And that's our job, isn't it? Isn't it our job to educate the American public about who we are? Because it's the truth. Your heritage is Lebanese. You're born here. Your parents, I think you were telling me, were from Lebanon. I'm born here. My parents are Palestinian. But Americans couldn't tell the difference between a Palestinian or a Pakistani, Iranian, or an Indian. They don't understand in many cases. They say they do, but apparently it's not important enough. Is it our fault that they don't understand us? I mean, the guy, a typical American, has to work, 8 to 10 hours a day. His wife's probably working 8 to 10 hours a day. They're trying to raise their kids. They're trying to put them through school. They want to pay the mortgage. They want to pay for their 2 cars. They want to put food on the table. When do they have time to think about who Arabs are or understand the Middle East? Whose job is it to help them understand what's going on?
Well, basically, it's ultimately on us. And I know there's organizations and local newspapers that do a good job of this. They're printed in Arabic and English, and they go through some of the nuances, but the nuances are many and they're varied. And you can't do it unless you're immediately involved in your social circle or your neighborhood or zip code or whatever is immediately involved with it. So we fall back on what we think we know from the mainstream media, and they do a stellar job when they're on task, but sometimes they get it wrong. I mean, during the COVID thing, I remember reading some of these articles in published journals by, internal medicine, College of Internal Medicine. And then I put on the local news, which, by the way, I haven't watched in almost 3 years now, but they have some physician from the emergency room giving his experience with COVID. And it was directly contradicting what it was saying in the academic journal. So how can people put 2 and 2 together when we're not giving them the 2 or the 2 to add it up? So, there's a lot of misinformation out there. We all can't be all experts on everything, but I think people individually have got to be raised with a set of values. And then they've got to stick to those values. As long as they are compassionate and they respect the human condition, then that's all you could ask from them. You can't expect them to do anything beyond that.
When you run for office, you ran a couple times. One time, I think, or twice, I can't remember, for the legislature. Correct?
Right. I was drafted to run for the Senate, which I had no idea for. They just said, we need a name. I said, okay. So the second time I ran for the state house, and that one I was in it to win it, but
You
fate
came
had
pretty
different
close
plans.
in that election to winning the Republican primary. You came in second, I think.
Yeah,
And
second out of 52 votes difference, I think, if I remember
Right.
correctly. But, you know, be that as it may. And then I went to the east side of Dearborn, which is predominantly Middle Eastern. And they were having a forum. I was the only Republican that showed up. I was not the only Republican in the race. But the first thing I did was say to them, I'm here as Paul Sophia as a candidate. I'm running on the Republican side, but don't confuse me with my political party. And in fact, I've been trying to get them down here. I've had them open up offices in the area, went over like a lead balloon. So I basically said, you know, we need outreach. And I apologize because the party hasn't been there for you. But I'm here now, and I maybe got out of the 300 people a vote. But still, it had to be said. It had to be said.
So it's basically not the Republican Party that's the problem. It's some of the leadership of the Republican Party nationally that causes problems for us. Because when you look at Republican or conservative issues, and I don't know if you agree with this, but I know most Arabs that I've talked to are opposed to abortion being used as birth control. They want to see a limit on abortion. Many Arabs that I know want more freedoms to pursue their religion, including in schools. They want to, they want compensation, the way other religions get it for going to private schools, to, Islamic schools, for example, the Muslim Arab community, and some Christian Arabs that go to Catholic schools or other schools. And they also believe in, they do believe in restrictions for guns, with gun control, but they don't believe in eliminating the weapons. I'm just talking to other people, that they feel that it shouldn't be easy to get a weapon, but everybody has a right to have a weapon to defend themselves. How does that sit with the Republican Party that you view those three issues: abortion, religion, gun control? Those are the three big fundamentals that distinguish the two big parties, the Democrats from Republicans.
I think, in a way, it's accurate. I mean, I can't take issue with any of that. I think it's kind of artificial because of our system here. We have party elections. Democrats in the primaries can't vote Republican, and Republicans can't vote Democrat. If they cross over, the ballot's tossed out. So in essence, it leaves people that have common sense solutions. Now, nationally, you get into philosophical things and stuff like that. But locally, it's more meat and potatoes, and, got things to do with how do you fund the schools? What about our streets? They're abysmal here. They raised our taxes 2 years ago for streets, and nothing's happening. It's still, fix the damn roads, which is the moniker of our governor, and she hasn't done anything, So it's the way it's so in law, the way it's so entrenched and the way it divides people, it's almost a natural function of that. I was advocating when I was running to do away with parties in Michigan. Maybe you have a governor that runs Republican or Democrat, and then that person would set the agenda, but all of the other politicians would do what their district wants. There's a lot of people out there.
So they have like an open primary, in other words, where everybody runs, and then the top two candidates then enter into a runoff if nobody gets 50% plus one vote.
Yeah, that's a possible. Another way is just let everybody vote for whoever they want. Not necessarily, they got to meet certain criteria. And so once they do that, they get on there and they say, I'm with this person because they're running as a Republican, or I'm with this one because they're running as a Democrat, but you don't get any nuance. There's no nuance, and that's what we need. We are a diverse nation. I don't mean that the way the left looks at it. I mean, the way our thoughts are. My brother and me are two distinct people. We're close and everything, but we don't agree on everything. And I think that's the way it should work. I think another problem in the system is our form of government is set up to be run by the states. And our state legislators should be looking after the state of Michigan or the state of Illinois or whatever. And then the US representatives, senators should be looking outward towards, you know, the worldly situations. Now, we have crossover there. It's not that cut and dry, but there are, you know, mechanisms to get a broader perspective, like interstate commerce and, you know, tariffs, things like that. But, you know, that's the way it should be. And, you know, the fact that, you know, they're asking people who are running for state office, what do you think about, you know, Yugoslavia or something like that? You know, it's good discussion, but when you're running for a state office, they've got to realize that you're not going to do anything like that. Nobody's saying we should go into Illinois and bomb them because of the Chicago Bears or something. You know, we just don't have that focus on, you know, fighting with other states. So we should keep it that way. And the governor should work together on trying to get stuff established in all 50 states if they feel a law for the country is better than 50 individual versions of it. So we have remedies, we have reasons for the way we're set, but people don't follow them. And the human nature wants power and money. Can't take those out of it.
We're on the line with Paul Sophia. He is a Republican and conservative Arab American political activist, a teacher and business consultant in the Dearborn area in Michigan. He served on various Michigan state boards. He was a former GOP candidate twice, including in Michigan's 15th state House district. And we're talking about, you know, the Arab American community and their politics. What is it? Trying to understand it, because I know a lot of Arab Americans are running for office. And sometimes, you know, we don't always win. We have a hard time sometimes. As soon as somebody says we're Arab, we're dragged into the Middle East conflict. And then you got PACs, you know, from the left and the right that are attacking us over issues that have nothing to do with the local district or House district or a city council. You know, I mean, I thought local races are about taxes, you know, home values, jobs, better education and things like that. But don't we get lost as Arab American candidates in the bigger picture of the Middle East?
I think, as I mentioned before, we've had a historic number of Arab Americans winning here in Dearborn, Hamtramck, and, you know, more so around the state. The election's coming up on Tuesday. There's more of them that may get through the primary election and things like that. But one of the things that have been discussed is with the Biden administration, the number of Arab Americans thinking of crossing over and voting Republican, because they're just disgusted with the lack of leadership there. We have a gentleman running for Congress in my district, the 12th district. His name is Hassan Nassim, and he's probably early 30s, very articulate, very smart, very unifying, very good natured, very articulate. He's an inviting person. You know, he's not like a you know, a crazy man, you know, that you think of in Washington, D.C. on the Republican side, where all they do is call people names and stuff like that. It's very inviting and stuff like that. So that's what we need. We need somebody who can explain their positions and say, this is good for everybody. If you follow the rules of the system, you will have a better than even chance of making. Now, you may not be president of Ford Motor Company or the United States or anything like that, but you will be able to earn a decent income. You'd have a chance for employment opportunities, and you'd have a decent middle-class income, raise your family and things like that. A lot of people, whether they're Arab or not, don't follow that. They don't follow it. And they prefer, you know, there's two ways to do this, and this was written about when Vanderbilt was building steamboats, how some people go to the government to get their advantage, and other people try to work it out themselves, you know, saying, you know what, just get out of my way. I don't need this. Henry Ford and the Willow Run plant was a perfect example of this, because they were making all of the aircraft for the United States. It was incredible what they did. And the way the guy just went ahead about and did it, he got the best people, he got the best engineers. Albert Kahn built the thing, but he was creative. Roosevelt got off his back. And that's what we need to do specifically with Arabs, because they're the ones bringing in the ideas. Now, they're not the only ones, but we're on Arabic radio and TV. So we got to say, hat tip to him. Donald Trump had, I forgot the guy's name. He was from California. He basically set up his transition party for him. He was an Arab American. We got Arabs in Congress. We had Spence Abraham in the Senate. And I'm not sure what they're looking for, the Arabs. You know, it's nobody could tell you what's good, what you need in life. They have to create a system where you can follow your dreams within the bounds of the law.
All right. Sophia, Paul Sophia, our guest, a Republican and conservative Arab American political activist, a teacher and a business consultant in the Dearborn area. He served on several Michigan state boards, and he was a former candidate twice in Michigan's local elections, including in Michigan's 15th state House district. Paul, listen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Ray. Thanks for the invitation and all the best.
I appreciate it. It was great talking with you. I'm Ray Hanania. You're listening to the Ray Hanania radio show here at WNZK AM 690 and WDMV AM 700 in Washington, D.C. This will be rebroadcast again tomorrow in Detroit, again at 7 a.m. and in Chicago at 1080 AM radio, covering all of Northern Illinois. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk with our next guest, Jim Zogby. We'll be right back right after these messages.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you.
Clap your hands if you're happy and you know it and you really want.
5-year-old Lila and her mom are on their way home from Grandma's, singing Lila's favorite song. A few blocks away, 25-year-old Dylan is visiting friends at a small party. He finishes off his last beer, later, skater, gets in his truck, and starts for home. Mom and Lila turn onto Maple Street.
If you're happy and you
So does Dylan.
If you're happy and you know it and you really want to show it. If you're happy and you know it, shout hooray, hooray!
Every 50 minutes in the United States, someone dies in a crash involving a driver impaired by alcohol or drugs. If you're impaired and you know it, don't drive. Drive sober. A message from the Michigan Office of Highway Safety Planning.
Are your hands feeling numb? Do you feel pain opening up a jar, turning a key? Are you noticing that your elbow and your shoulder are becoming stiff? Or were you recently injured in your arm? Hello, I'm Dr. Albanjit Katranji, and at the Katranji Hand Center, which just recently opened down the street from the Somerset Mall, we can provide you with the latest in hand, wrist, elbow, and shoulder care. Visit us at www.katranjihandcenter.com to learn the latest techniques that we have to offer you, and I look forward to taking care of you.
Visit us in Troy at 1565 West Big Beaver Road, Building F, or call Katranji Hand Center for an appointment at 248-869-4263. That's 248-869-4263.
Imagine you're on a train track, somewhere miles away. A train is headed your way. You can't see it yet, but it's coming, slowly but surely. If you have prediabetes or you're at risk for type 2 diabetes, you may be on the wrong track, and diabetes could be heading your way. Bit by bit, the danger is getting closer and closer. So should you stay on the track you're on now or move to make a change and reduce your risk? If you have prediabetes or you're at risk for type 2 diabetes, you may qualify for the National Diabetes Prevention Program in your local community. This one-year program could be the ongoing support you need to put you on the right track. Not only did participants lose weight, they cut their risk of type 2 diabetes in half. Ready to get on board for a healthier future? Learn more about the National Diabetes Prevention Program and what else you can do to manage and prevent diabetes at michigan.gov/diabetes. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
The Ray Hanania Show is brought to you by the U.S. Arab Radio Network and sponsored by Arab News Newspaper, the Middle East's leading English language publication, with print and online editions in Saudi Arabia, Dubai, France, Japan, Pakistan, England, and the United States. Listen to live radio every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern in Detroit, Washington, D.C., New York, and Ontario, Canada. Or watch the live broadcast on Facebook.com/Arab News. The Ray Hanania Show is rebroadcast in Chicago at 12 noon on Thursday. For more information on the radio stations, live Facebook broadcast, and podcasts, visit ArabNews.com. And now, here's your host, columnist and U.S. Special Correspondent for Arab News, Ray Hanania.
We're really honored to have this next guest. I don't think I know anyone who understands politics who's from the Arab American community better than this guest, Jim Zogby. Jim is president and co-founder of the Arab American Institute based in Washington, D.C., and serves as a political and policy research arm of the Arab American community in 1985 and since 1985, and he continues to serve as its president. He's director of Zogby Research Services, a firm that has conducted groundbreaking surveys across the Middle East. He's done so much, and I have his bio online. You could read it, but he's been involved in the biggest campaigns in this country. I know I met him, I think it was in the late 70s, early 80s, and he was a great inspiration to get involved in politics. Jim, welcome to the program today. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you. It was very kind of you to say all that, Ray.
Well, listen, if it wasn't true, honestly, I mean, we were talking earlier and I said, there aren't that many Arabs, Americans that are really involved in politics. And of course, you pointed out, you said, are you saying I'm like the only person that you could find to invite on the show?
From, yeah. So, yeah, Zogby, there's nobody very good out there, so I decided to take you.
No. Listen, there are some great candidates out there, but really, when you understand and talk about politics, and politics and elections, they're not always exactly the same.
Let me just say one thing about that, because I was talking to Summer Lee today, the young woman who won the primary in Pittsburgh. We had lunch today, and I was telling her about some people that I recommended to other folks when they first got elected to Congress here in town. One of them was Ron Walters. You might remember him, Howard University, Jackson campaign, one of the really great political analysts. But it always bothered me that they would say Ron Walters, a leading analyst of Black politics. And he actually was the leading analyst I knew of politics, period. He was so insightful. But I know in my case that it's like, I like to think of myself as somebody who knows politics. I've been involved most of my life in it. But what invariably happens is that it's the white guys who get to do that. I get to do the, tell us how the little brown people are feeling right now about the backlash or about hatred or, hate crime, something like that. Never about, Zogby, what do you think about who's going to win the Democratic primary, or what are the issues at stake in this election? You have to be narrowcast. If you're Arab, you're narrowcast. If you're anything else, you can talk about the world.
Yeah. In other words, you're saying that when I was at the newspaper at the Sun-Times in the Southtown covering Chicago City Hall, it was like the only time they'd call me to ask me about something outside of City Hall politics was if it had to do with being Arab. And it was like, that's what they wanted me to cover. Yeah. Rather than saying, Ray, we want you to go cover the transportation industry, or do something, we get pegged. Yeah. Does that hold you back? I mean, does that hold Arab Americans
back? It always has. It always has. It's that, I when you get narrowcast, you get tight, you get typed. And so, and then coupled with the fact that being of Arab descent means that if you do get a chance to weigh in on something other than that, you've got the fear of the ADL or some group coming after you saying, do you know who he is? I mean, one of the first breaks I got to do something beyond the narrow scope was National Italian American Foundation. Fred Rotondaro, a great friend of mine, called back in the early 80s and asked me to co-chair a group that Gino Paolucci, the guy who started Gino's Pizzas, was creating to deal with ethnic issues across the board, things that affected ethnic immigrant communities. And one of them was media stereotyping, and because Italians got issues with that, we got issues, lots of people do. He asked me to chair the group. ADL went ballistic. If you include them, then we'll have nothing to do with you, whatever. Fred stuck by me, but it always was an issue that if you got out of that if you were in that box, they had you cornered. If you got out of that box, they tried to push you back in the box. And so that was, I think it was damaging to a lot of folks.
But you managed to break through all that. I mean, when I'm looking at your resume, 84 and 88, you were the deputy campaign manager, senior advisor to Jesse Jackson's presidential campaign. In 88, you led the first ever debate on Palestinian statehood at the Democratic Convention in Atlanta, Georgia. In 2000 and 2008 and 2016, you were an advisor to the Gore, Obama, and Sanders presidential campaigns. Tell us, I mean, first of all, you were at the levers. You were right at the table. There are not a lot of people who can say that on a national level. But
well, let me just say that everything that we've been able to accomplish, it goes back to the Jackson 84 and 88. It empowered the community like nothing else ever did. And it was the first presidential campaign to include Arab Americans by name as a community. There'd been Syrian Americans for Carter, Lebanese Americans for Reagan. There'd never been Arab Americans as a community. And Jackson did that. And we showed our stuff, right? I mean, we produced rather significantly. Yeah, it's been a good ride. I mean, I've enjoyed it. Sometimes I feel like Sisyphus, rolling that stone up the hill, knowing it's going to come rolling back down. Remember Jack Odell, who was one of Jesse's advisors, said, just when you think you've won, don't turn your back, because there'll be people with knives and stick them in you. And I've seen that. I've lived through that, right? But progress has been made, and I feel good about that. I mean, today we had a meeting, a project that we've been working on to bring young Arab American elected officials to partner with elected officials in countries in the Arab world. I wanted to do it for two reasons. One is most of the young folks elected to office in our country have never been to the Arab world, unless they've been to their own, where their parents came from, kind of thing. Right. So bringing them to Tunisia or Morocco or Jordan or the Gulf, that's a big deal, and it broadens their sense of possibility about what the Arab world is about. We had our first today with our new Jordan project, and seeing these mayors and state senators and presidents of city council from across the country. It's really quite heartening, to see that, as my uncle Farid used to say, this young generator. It's they're making real progress. Things that I never thought were possible. They're actually doing them, and I feel great about it.
When you look at the Arab American community today, I know Dearborn is, Michigan, Dearborn. The Arab community has been very successful in terms of elections. And, next week we'll have Mayor Abdullah Hammoud is going to join us to talk about what he's doing over there. Wonderful. I'm sure he's inspirational. But when you look at the Arab American community, what's happening in our community politically? I mean, when you look across the country, are we still divided? Have we come together more? Are we isolated? It seems like nobody's happy with the Republicans. Nobody's happy with the Democrats. It seems to be an issue. How do you describe them?
Here's the thing. I used to describe the community as being on like looking at an arrow shooting through time, right? And at one end of the arrow were those who were like the oldest here. They've been here so long, third generation, fourth generation, doesn't mean anything to them anymore. It's like they might have hummus and tabbouleh, but there's no sense of belonging to it. That's fine. The other end, the most recent, there's folks who are here, I say, with their feet on the ground here, but their heads are still back there. And they're fighting all the battles from back, quote unquote, home. This arrow moves in time, so that the generation that is the one that's in the middle today will be back here with the third, the other group that is like, forget it, I'm not nothing to do with it. And the group that is just here with their politics of the Middle East, they'll move to the center be replaced by a new group of new immigrants. So if you think about it in that way, yeah, there's always divisions. And there is, as I chair the Ethnic Council in the Democratic Party, it is with every one of them. I mean, every community has them. But we reached a point, I think, back in the 90s, where the children of the wave of immigrants that had come after World War II had settled in and took a leadership role, myself, yourself, people like that, who had a sense of, I know the politics over there, that's not going to define me. I want to be an American, and I want to focus here on what we can do to help the people in the region. We are now facing a new challenge of recent immigrants who've been coming since the 90s in larger numbers than ever, who are bringing the politics of the Middle East, especially after Arab Spring, and being diverted from focusing on their American identity and how do I advance in America? I remember after when they had the first election in Iraq, some guy was interviewed, a Chaldean guy from San Diego in the New York Times, and he said, "I'm so proud because they were voting here in America." He said, "For the first time in my life, I get to vote in an election." And I'm like, wait a minute. This guy was the vice chair of the Republican Party of San Diego County. He's the vice chair of the Republican Party, and he's saying for the first time in his life, he gets to vote. What? Right. I oppose that dual citizenship thing for that reason. It devalues your sense of being here and makes you participate in a situation you don't belong. I mean, you should not vote in the Lebanese election if you're not going to have to live with the consequences of it there. Shouldn't vote in the Iraq election if you're not going to have to live with the consequences there. Your politics should be here. Anyway, so we're still dealing with that. And that will be a constant. I mean, every wave will bring with it its own divisions, but the center is also a constant. With the folks I had on the phone today, they didn't know what ethnicity. I mean, one of the women's Tunisian, another's Jordanian, one's Palestinian. I thought one was Lebanese. They turn out to be Jordanian too, another Egyptian. These are young Arab Americans who have no sense of division. They're just functioning as proud of a heritage, people proud of a heritage who want to contribute back to the Middle East, regardless of what country we're asking them to partner with. So I think that you can, if you focus on the one side, the most recent crowd, you say, oh my God, we're so divided. Focus on the other side, you say, oh my God, nobody even cares. But look in the middle, and you'll see a whole bunch of people that grows in time, that cares and has a very different consciousness. I focus on them. That's where our work has to be. They're the ones who are going to move us forward.
I've always thought that, and I agree with you. I mean, I always refer to many Arab Americans are physically here, but they're mentally still back home. They're focused on what's happening there instead of what's happening right around them. But I've seen it change over the years. And I know that we've addressed many issues. Tell us what are some of the big issues where we've been successful, and what are some of the big issues where we haven't been as a community in politics?
Mm-hmm. Let me just make one other point. I think that another new issue that we're facing internally is not just the country divisions and the focus on that, it's the religion issue, which is something that is very divisive. And our principal identity needs to be secular, ethnic. I am a religious person. I go to church. I'm a Catholic. I lived through that damn civil war in Lebanon. I will not let the religious identity define my politics. It's divisive. But people would say, I am not an Arab, I am Christian. Now we got people saying I'm not an Arab, I'm Muslim. And look at me and define me as a Christian Arab. No, I'm an Arab American. That's what I am. And I'm fighting we have these two internal divisions, the country specific politics and this religious divide. We can't let either one define us. If we do, the community falls apart, and that's something I don't want to see happen. What are the issues that we've been successful?
let me just follow up on that, because that's so important. I was actually going to bring that up. Americans, non-Arabs, look at the word Arab and treat it like a 4-letter word. They look at Muslim and it appeals to them more because 75% of Muslims in the United States are not Arab. Isn't it because we're Arab that we get kind of the Arab
Of
side
course.
is the one that
Of
gets
course.
targeted?
I mean, and look, I mean, we paid such a price from the ADL and all them because we were Arab American and therefore had an issue on Palestine that we cared about. And then I in 2016, they were telling me you should feel great because we had 6 Muslims speak at the convention. Not a single one was Arab.
Right.
Not a single one said anything about the Middle East. And I'm saying that one is not a substitute for the other. Please respect our ethnicity and our concerns. And don't think that if you find somebody who, God bless them, from Pakistan, I'm proud that they're being advanced in politics, but that does not substitute for having Rashida, right? Or somebody who is Palestinian or Lebanese American, whatever. They're not interchangeable parts, and I hate to see us conflated. It still is a reality that almost 70% of the Arab American community is Christian.
Right.
I do not want to define it as a Christian community. It's not. It's a secular ethnic identity community, and I'm proud of that.
Listen, go into your conferences in Washington. I remember in the 80s and the 90s made me so proud to be Arab. And it's been very hard for me to break from that because for example, like this issue with the census, it sounds like MENA is a compromise rather than using the word Arab. I would rather be identified as Arab. I don't want people to call me Christian or Muslim. I want to be Arab. Tell me.
Here's the problem with that. Back in the 80s, I remember I was at ADC. We had founded that and got involved. Helen Samhan, you might remember, was our person dealing with the census back then. And we got a call from a woman, African-American woman at the census, who was a director there. And she said, I understand that you're asking for an Arab category. She said, you really don't want it. And I said, why? And she said, because if you get it, you're going to lose about 60% of your count. And I said, what do you mean? She said, look, the way we do it right now is there are 83 categories that if people fill them in, when we ask for heritage or ancestry, we ask ancestry. If they fill any one of them in, we record them as Arab. So if you put in Lebanese or Palestinian or Syrian or Egyptian or Libyan, or if you put from Tripoli, if you put Phoenician, if you put Chaldean, whatever you put in, they would lump it together as Arab because number one, the census doesn't count religion. They're prohibited by law from doing it. And number two, they needed a category that would actually create for us and for them a convenient way of figuring out where the community was. Now, we did that for ourselves, but there are several other ancestry groups that don't get counted. And the way that the census decided to compromise with us back in the Obama administration was to create a MENA category. Now, that doesn't mean we're MENA American. Some people have latched onto that. That's nonsense. There's no such thing as a MENA American. I mean, only at Trader Joe's where they will not use Arab. What do they call it? Mediterranean-inspired kibbe balls. I mean, what kind of crap is that? I mean,
I agree.
Is Italian food Mediterranean-inspired spaghetti? No,
we're
Italian.
We're the only ones that are Mediterranean.
Right.
When Arab comes up.
And Mediterranean-inspired, by the way, right?
Right.
And kibbe, damn it, is Lebanese and Syrian only. It doesn't, unfortunately, it's not to dismiss any other group, but it's a uniquely, Syrian Lebanese food. Anyway, so we decided to create the category on the ancestry one. You put down ancestry, MENA, but then under it, they would say, which country? So we would still get an Arab category, but it would allow the Turks and the Iranians and maybe the Armenians too, to get counted, and the Israelis to get counted in that, but it would not say that there's a MENA group. It would say that there's a MENA is simply a rubric under which these unique ethnic groups get counted. So we can pull up still a Lebanese number and a Syrian number and a Libyan number, but we also can pull up an Arab number by lumping them all together, which gives us a sense of number.
Well, I know in the census in the past, they've had Hispanic and then they've had a variety of Hispanic categories and Latino, and there might be 15 different categories to define yourself as Hispanic. I have no problem if they want to categorize all that, say MENA, Arab, whatever. I just would like to say that I'm Arab. One day I'd like to have someone recognize me as being Arab.
And let me tell you, the single largest group in the census, as I recall, under that ancestry question, put in Arab. They don't put in Lebanese or Palestinian or Syrian. And you know who they are? They're first, second generation born here.
Right.
They and sometimes they have like a combination parents who are one and the other, right? So yeah, it's like we've gone beyond, I think, the generation born here has gone beyond the divisions. And I think that's the exciting thing to note.
That is inspiring. And I know moving forward, the census has been going on for 40 years, 4 decades, because I know I was involved in the census in the 80s and then in the 90s and then in 2000. It seems like we're slowly moving ahead. But get back to that issue of what have been our successes? What have been our failures? What are the challenges that still remain, do you think, for Arab Americans?
The first success sounds minimal, but is huge. And that is gaining acceptance for the community and a recognition of our name. The fact that we have Arab American Heritage Month, back when we started this stuff back in the ADC days and in the early days of the Institute, candidates gave money back. No candidate had an Arab American committee. It was, you couldn't get recognition for Arab Americans. And also the community didn't identify as I can remember bringing members of Congress together and hearing Spencer Abraham for the first time say he was Arab American, or Ray LaHood say, I'm an Arab American. And I looked over at Helen and I said, we won, we got that. They now can use it. It was something that they wouldn't do. And now they do. And we're still fighting the fight for recognition and acceptance, but we're a hell of a lot further along the way than we ever were before. And so that's one big victory. I am inundated with requests from Congress people to do fundraisers for them with Arab Americans. I go back to 40 years ago when we got the money back. Now they want it, and that's a good thing, I think. I think we've also won recognition for the issues that we care about. We wrote and passed the Jabara Hire Hate Crime Act, the No Hate Act. Maya Berry in my office wrote it. She is considered today the expert on hate crime laws as they exist in all 50 states. She's researched them. We wrote a book on it. There was a time when people, when I first would go to the FBI and say, I got a death threat, they'd come back with, oh, boys will be boys. It's like, well, that's what I actually heard that's what you get for speaking out on those issues. What do you expect? My office was firebombed in 1980. FBI did nothing. Now, the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights has a task force on hate crimes. The ADL used to chair it. Now Maya Berry chairs it. They've been kicked off because she's now the expert in it. That's a big victory that we're in the driver's seat on that issue. It may not be, some people in the community, I think, have a sense that if you're in government and you're not, on a suicide mission, you're a loser. But I think having Hadi Amar as Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and envoy is a huge thing. That was inconceivable. That position was always Jewish. And now it's an Arab American. And sure, he hasn't changed Biden's policy. He hasn't changed Blinken's policy. But if you look under the surface and see what little things Hadi's been able to do that wouldn't have happened had he not been there, it's big.
So it's a progression, in other words, because I see all these Arab Americans, but I'm going to tell you what, if I wanted a Jewish American at the State Department to come on the radio, they'll be there in a second. If I want an Arab American to come on the radio, there's a hesitancy, not so much on their part, but the State Department. It's almost like, I don't want to say they're muzzled, but we don't hear from them publicly the way we hear from the other side. But it's still a movement, as you said. Hadi Amr, they're getting there is a huge success.
And there are things that happen there, like I said, that wouldn't have happened had he not been there.
Right.
And I mean, I remember years ago, my son was successful in passing a criminal justice reform bill. And I went over to Senator Specter's office. There was a big meeting on it. Joe is chief of staff to the Judiciary Committee, chief counsel for Senator Durbin. And he's been writing this stuff for years. And he wrote this bill, and the bill passed. And all the groups were there, all the civil rights groups were there. They were belly aching. This is a terrible, didn't get it, this, didn't get that. And Joe kept saying, but look, guys, we needed to get 60 votes to get it through. And so we had to make compromises to get it. Yeah, but it didn't do this and it didn't do that. Finally, Laura Murphy from the ACLU said, you know what? She said, as a result of this bill that Joe Zogby wrote and Durbin got passed, this Christmas, 31,000 men are going to be home with their mothers and families that wouldn't have been home with their mothers and families if this bill hadn't passed. It's not the 300,000 you want freed, but it's 31,000. It's a small step, but it's a good step. How can you say no to those mothers and wives? And that's how I look at this too. I mean, I look at the stuff that Handy's been able to do. It's not great, not perfect, but if it hadn't happened, those hospitals in East Jerusalem wouldn't have gotten the money. UNRWA wouldn't have gotten the money. The partnership program wouldn't have got. There are things that he actually has make happen. It's always better to have somebody sitting in the room at the table than not being in the room at the table.
And it's part of the progression forward.
And Rashida, just being in Congress, the day after the new Congress got seated, back when she was first elected, there, if you recall, Elliot Engel and Gottheimer and all these other guys had a bill on denouncing anti-Semitism. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. They could not pass that bill because they couldn't look Rashida Tlaib in the eye and do it. And Nancy Pelosi and them sat down with her and said, what do you think of this? She said, no. And the bill got squashed. And so I think the fact that we win little victories add up to bigger victories. We should never, as I like to say, the quote that everybody uses, never let the perfect be the enemy of the good. When we're making little bits of progress, work with them, build them, grow them. And that's, I think, where I see things happening right now. Look at the number of candidates running this year who are good. And sure, AIPAC's pouring tens of millions to beat these people. But it's like that right now, AIPAC's playing whack-a-mole. They're
just hitting everybody.
They're hitting everybody, and they just keep coming back.
Diana Edwards was a good example. I mean,
and Andy Levin,
yes,
who is Jewish and pro-Israel, but has said that Israel's aid should be cut if they violate human rights, and they're going after him with millions of dollars, and he's Jewish. I mean, they're gonna come out of this election with a black eye, some wins, but a black eye. And I'd rather be where we are than where they are. We're in this for the long haul. We're not in this for one round. We're going to beat these bastards. And I think it's going to be fascinating to watch it in the years to come. I look at where we were, I see where we are, and the trajectory is upward, and we're going in the right direction.
I love it. Jim, unfortunately, I'm telling you, radio goes by fast. I really hope you'll come on again, because maybe after the election.
I could have actually done the 5:10. I'm sorry, but let's
No, that's all right.
Call me whatever. If you're not tired of hearing from me, just call me. I can do next week, whatever.
We're going to milk you for every bit of experience that you've had, 45, 50 years of experience, starting when you were 8 years old. You're doing a good job, Jim. Jim Zogby, my guest, the president and co-founder of the Arab American Institute. And I don't have to tell you how much he knows about politics. He's been a great inspiration to me and so many others. And we're almost the same age. But he was the first place you would go to when you wanted to understand politics. Jim, thank you so much for joining us. Honestly, I appreciate it. We got to have you on again. I'm Ray Hanania. I hope you join us again next Wednesday when we're here at the Ray Hanania Show at WNZK AM 690 in Detroit, WDMV AM 700 in Washington, D.C., and 1280 in Chicago on Thursday at 12 noon. You guys have a great week. We will talk to you again. Bye-bye, everybody.
WNZK has available a few good hours